Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to share a story that reminds us that what the world calls failure can often be the first step toward building something revolutionary. Most people believe you have to be born in the right place at the right time, with the right connections to succeed. That's not true. The world doesn't hand success only to those with privilege. What matters more is how you choose to respond to where you start. Being born in a country that lacks infrastructure, access to resources, or a thriving tech ecosystem might seem like a disadvantage. And in many ways it is. But it also creates a different kind of strength, the kind that comes from figuring things out on your own, from being resourceful, from not expecting the answers to be handed to you. When you're surrounded by limitations, you start looking at the world differently. You start asking harder questions. You become more curious, more driven. You don't take access for granted. You study harder because you have fewer chances to fail. You build differently because the tools aren't always available. You hustle because you know no one is coming to save you. And in that environment, something powerful happens. You learn to solve problems creatively, not because it's trendy, but because you have no choice. What many consider an obstacle can actually be your edge. If you weren't born into a place with the latest technology, then every time you do get access to it, you treat it like gold. You dig deep, you learn it inside out, and then you start thinking, why doesn't everyone have this? That's where purpose is born, not from abundance, but from lack. The best ideas, the most transformative ones, often come from people who experience the problem firsthand, not from those watching it from afar. There's a tendency to idolize the environments that seem perfect, the elite schools, the venture capital, the polished resumes. But raw determination, paired with curiosity, outperforms that polish every time. The mindset that says, I'll build it anyway, is stronger than the mindset that says, I'll wait for permission. If your environment doesn't have a path, you make one. If it doesn't have a blueprint, you draw one. And if no one believes in you, you believe in yourself until they do. Where you come from can shape you, but it doesn't define you. What defines you is how you react to where you come from. Do you use it as an excuse or as fuel? Do you let it shrink you, or does it give you the hunger to grow? The truth is, some of the most innovative thinkers didn't start in comfort. They started in chaos. But they didn't let that chaos stop them. They used it to sharpen their vision. They built their future, not in spite of their background, but because of it. And that made all the difference. Failure has this reputation, that it's something to avoid, something embarrassing, something to fear. But that's a misunderstanding. Failure, when you look closely, is data. It's feedback from reality. It's the world saying, not quite, try again. The people who get ahead aren't the ones who avoid failure. They're the ones who build a relationship with it. They learn to listen, not panic. They study what went wrong, fix it, and then run the experiment again. And again and again. The myth is that success is linear, that you start with a good idea, pitch it, build it, and launch it to applause. In reality, it's messy. It's late nights, broken prototypes, awkward silences in meetings, and people who don't believe in what you're doing. It's that moment when your best idea doesn't work, and you have to ask yourself, is it the idea or is it me? And instead of walking away, you double down and dig deeper. That digging, that's where breakthroughs happen. Because when something fails, it forces you to look closer, to ask better questions, to refine your thinking. Sometimes the first version of an idea is off target, but buried inside it is a core insight that's solid gold. You don't get to that gold without breaking a few things first. You have to be willing to fall in love with the problem, not just the solution. Because the solution might need to change, often drastically. Failure also teaches humility. It resets the ego. It reminds you that you don't know everything, and that's a gift, because as soon as you accept that, you become more open. You listen better, you collaborate more, you stop pretending and start learning, and in that space, real progress happens. The most valuable skills aren't taught in textbooks or lectures. They're learned when things don't go according to plan. They're learned when you launch something and nobody uses it. When you think you've nailed it and the market says, no thanks. That's when you realize success isn't about avoiding failure. It's about navigating through it, pivoting, adjusting, rewriting, rebuilding not once, but dozens of times. Sometimes hundreds. So failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of it. It's the training ground. Every misstep is shaping you, testing how badly you want it, preparing you to do it better next time. The only real failure is refusing to try again. Because if you keep going, failure eventually runs out of ways to stop you. If something breaks, fix it. If the world says no, reframe the question. Don't let a temporary result convince you you're permanently wrong. Keep experimenting, keep learning. You're not falling behind. You're figuring it out, one failure at a time. It's easy to get caught up in building things for the sake of building, to chase innovation without asking the most important question. Asterisk, why does this matter? Asterisk, the world is full of shiny products that do nothing but add noise. But the real power of technology, of creativity, of human effort, lies in solving problems that actually impact people's lives. DSEEPESSTDMEANINGIZEXTENSIOANS. It's not about creating something that looks cool. It's about fixing something that's broken, simplifying something that's frustrating, or making something that was once inaccessible now available to everyone. When you look at the biggest breakthroughs, the ones that truly shift the way we live, they usually begin with a simple, overlooked frustration. Not glamorous, not headline-worthy, just something quietly wrong with how the world works, and someone decides they care enough to fix it. That's where meaningful innovation starts, not with grand ambition, but with focused intention. You don't need to invent something out of thin air. You just need to notice what others overlook. What are people wasting time on? What systems are outdated? What processes are broken? What knowledge or access is being denied to people simply because they were born in the wrong zip code or income bracket? Solving real problems means understanding real people. It means putting yourself in the shoes of the user, not just the investor. It means listening more than pitching. The most valuable ideas don't come from whiteboards in sleek conference rooms. They come from empathy, from frustration, from the need to make things better not just for yourself, but for everyone. There's something incredibly powerful about creating tools that serve a purpose beyond profit, that serve education, access, security, equality. When you do that, when you root your work in a real need, people notice because they feel it. They know when a product was built to help them, not manipulate them. And here's the truth. Solving real problems is good business. If you build something that makes life meaningfully easier, people will use it. If you make it accessible, they'll share it. If you make it universal, it scales without needing to convince anyone, because the problem itself does the marketing. You don't need to start with 100 ideas. You just need to find one thing that matters and do it well. One frustration, one broken system, one barrier that shouldn't exist. Solve that, really solve it, and you'll be doing more than building a product. You'll be building trust, impact, change. Innovation isn't just about what you can make, it's about what you can fix. The best kind of creator isn't the one who says, "Look what I made." It's the one who hears, "Thank you, this made my life better." That's the kind of work worth doing. Most people chase ideas that sound impressive. They build things that check all the boxes for success, growth, scale, monetization. But the question that often gets ignored is, who is this really helping? There's a difference between creating something valuable and creating something impactful. Value gets measured in numbers. Impact gets measured in lives changed. There's a mindset shift that happens when you stop thinking about how big your idea can get and start thinking about how deep it can reach. Instead of asking, "How can I make this profitable?" ask, "How can this solve a real problem for someone who needs it most?" That shift changes everything. Because once purpose becomes the goal, scale becomes the byproduct. When something is built to solve a problem that millions of people face, not just the top 1%, it spreads naturally. Not because of fancy ads, but because people feel it's for them. They feel seen. They feel empowered. And that kind of loyalty, that kind of word of mouth is stronger than any marketing campaign you could pay for. Real impact doesn't need a PR firm. It speaks for itself. What's even more powerful is when the thing you build isn't just used by those who can afford it, but by those who need it most. Accessibility isn't a business compromise, it's a mission. When you design for everyone, not just for profit, you tap into a global energy. People everywhere are hungry to learn, to grow, to connect. But most of the world doesn't have the privilege of access. If you can bring that to them, you're not just building a product, you're building a movement. Think about the ripple effect. Teach one person a new skill, and you change their life. Make that education free and scalable, and you change entire communities. Empower someone in a village with no formal education to learn what someone in a top-tier university is learning, and suddenly you flatten the world just a little bit. That's the real potential of technology, not to create the next viral app, but to close the gaps the world has been widening for decades. It's not enough to make something that works, make something that matters, something that improves the odds for someone who had none. Something that removes barriers instead of creating new ones. Because when people use your creation and it actually makes their life better, helps them learn, get a job, access a future they didn't think was possible, that's a different kind of reward. One that no revenue report can measure. Impact isn't a side effect of purpose. It's the reason to start. The irony is, when you aim for deep, meaningful change, success often follows. But even if it doesn't, you'll know you built something worth building. Something you'd be proud to stand behind, no matter the outcome. And that kind of work, the kind that lifts others, is the only work that truly lasts. There's a myth that greatness comes from genius, that some people are just born with the perfect ideas, perfect timing, and perfect execution. But most of the time, the real advantage isn't brilliance, it's staying power, it's persistence, the ability to keep going after things stop being exciting. After the first version fails, after the enthusiasm fades and reality sets in, that's when it really counts, and that's when most people quit. The difference between success and almost success is often invisible from the outside. Two people can have the same idea. One builds it, hits a wall, and walks away. The other hits the same wall, maybe even harder, but chooses to keep moving. Not because it feels good, but because the problem still matters. Because they believe the answer is somewhere out there, and they're willing to try again to find it. What most people call a gift is often just endurance. The willingness to get feedback, apply it, and try again. The ability to look at something that didn't work and say, let's run one more experiment. And not for the applause, but for the learning. The world tends to reward persistence in the long run, even if it punishes it in the short term. There are no perfect first drafts. The first version of anything meaningful is usually clunky, flawed, incomplete. But that's fine, because progress doesn't come from perfection, it comes from iteration. Each version teaches you something. Each mistake brings you closer to something that works. The key is not being discouraged when it doesn't happen fast. Building anything real takes time. Patience isn't just a virtue, it's a strategy. And here's something people don't talk about enough. Boredom is part of the process. There will be long stretches where it's not fun, where the results aren't clear, where nobody's watching. That's when discipline kicks in. That's when you work because the work matters, not because it's exciting. Passion might get you started, but consistency is what gets you to the finish line. Being persistent doesn't mean being stubborn. It means being adaptive. It means listening to the data, learning from what's not working, and still moving forward, maybe in a different direction, maybe at a different pace, but forward always. That kind of mindset turns small efforts into compounding results. Over time, the person who just kept showing up, who kept improving, kept listening, kept caring, ends up far ahead of the person who had a stronger start but gave up too soon. In the end, it's not about being the smartest or the fastest. It's about staying in the game, about showing up again and again and again until the thing you've been building finally clicks. Persistence doesn't guarantee success, but quitting guarantees failure. And sometimes the simple act of not giving up is the most powerful advantage you can have. There's this idea that world-changing innovation is reserved for a special kind of person, someone with the perfect resume, the elite degree, the massive network. But that's not how real change happens. Most of the people who make the biggest impact didn't start with power. They started with a question, a frustration, a belief that something could be better. And then they did something most people don't. They acted on it. Everyone has ideas. The difference is what happens after the idea shows up. Do you talk yourself out of it? Do you wait until you feel ready? Or do you start even if it's messy, even if you don't know everything, even if no one else believes in it yet? The truth is, the best ideas often come from the most unexpected places, from people who have lived the problem, from people who aren't stuck inside the usual systems. When you don't have a polished background, you see things differently. You ask better questions. You're not bound by the way things are done. That's an advantage, if you're brave enough to use it. The world doesn't need more perfect people doing what's already been done. It needs more people willing to take risks on ideas that matter, willing to step into uncomfortable spaces, willing to build something without waiting for permission. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to care enough to try and keep trying when it gets hard. Change doesn't happen when someone appoints you. It happens when you appoint yourself, when you look at a broken system and say, I can help fix this. When you see something unfair and think, there's got to be a better way. That moment when you take ownership of a problem is where real innovation begins. Not with status, with intention. Most of the tools we use every day, the apps, the platforms, the systems, were once an idea in someone's head. Someone who probably had doubts, who probably thought, who am I to do this? But they did it anyway. They started small, they failed, they learned, and they kept going. Over time, their belief turned into something others could believe in, too. That same potential lives in everyone. It's not about waiting for the right moment. It's about realizing there isn't one. There's just now and what you do with it. The world is full of problems. Some are massive, others quiet. But every one of them is waiting for someone who sees things differently. Someone who's tired of waiting. Someone who's ready to build. That someone could be you. All it takes is the decision to begin, and the courage to keep going long after the spotlight fades. Because real change doesn't need a stage. It just needs someone to start.